Did you see the recent production that was done by Ted Koppel on the Republic of China and democracy?
I did, and having been to China twice in the last 2 years, I was very interested in it. China has an interesting model now. They have a free enterprise system, except it's a totalitarian government.
Right.
So what they really have is capitalism under totalitarianism, right. Meaning that there's a lot of money to be made by individuals, many of them Communist Party members or former members. But you can also go in as a business person, do business for a few years, and then be told, you're gone.
Right.
You have to leave.
And they seize your assets and your business.
Yeah, and it is exploitive of the workers. I met many women in China who were working for pennies a day under very bad conditions. Mm-hmm. And there's no regulation of the companies. We've seen that with the products coming over here that are tainted or dangerous.
Right. Well, one of the things that I thought was interesting in your book is you brought up the fact that the United States doesn't have an Equal Rights Amendment. I mean, I think everybody is under the impression that we do have an Equal Rights Amendment. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
The polls show that most Americans think women have equal rights under the Constitution of the United States. We don't. And we're probably the only industrialized country on earth that doesn't. And many emerging democracies have stronger constitutions than we do when it comes to women's rights. We tried to get it in the 70s, 80s. It failed. It has to be ratified by 2/3 of the states, and it failed by 3 states. But most people think we have it. What we have, Bernadette, we do have some guarantees. We have laws that, for example, outlaw discrimination in employment or in schools. But you know what? Those can be overturned by a hostile Congress and signed by a hostile president. Mm-hmm. President Bush has already tried to weaken Title IX, the Equal Educational Opportunity Law. He's tried for 8 years.
There have been some changes, though, to Title IX, hasn't there?
There have been.
Yeah,
he has weakened it through regulation, not taking it to Congress, mm-hmm. but just saying, well, we're going to pass new regulations, making it easier for schools to get away with, for example, not offering women equal numbers of scholarships when they're equally qualified women. I want to say this is always about equally qualified women and men. It's not about quotas or preferences, but when you have a pool of athletes or scientists or law school applicants, and some of them are women and some are men, there needs to be that balance, and that's what Title IX is about. Mm-hmm. But the president, through regulation in his education department, has made it easier for schools to just ignore that. Mm-hmm. And we are now seeing through a backdoor regulation in No Child Left Behind that we're having single-sex schools again. They've been illegal since 1972. Uh-huh. But now, because of a tiny little provision in No Child Left Behind, we're seeing them come back. We don't think, as advocates for women and girls, and for boys, that that's a good thing, because they're based on stereotypes. Boys are too hard to handle, girls are easier to handle, they learn better, they're quieter, they shouldn't be challenged as much because their feelings might be hurt. And one school district in Louisiana went so far as to sex segregate their schools, saying boys needed to go out and learn how to slay animals and girls needed to learn how to take care of babies. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Interesting. So rolling the clock back.
Yes.
Well, there were several things that you brought up. In my book I wrote about the battle to raise the minimum wage that went on in 2006 with the Republican-controlled Congress at that time. And the only way that they agreed to raise the minimum wage, which hadn't been raised in over 10 years, in the meantime they had gotten several raises for themselves, and cost of living and everything else had gone up, was if they tied what they called the trifecta. And they were going to give them more cuts to the very wealthy. This kind of Reaganite mentality. If we just continue cutting taxes, which is absolutely insane because we're, you know, I say we're drilling our own grave. If we think we can
Yes.
drill our way into getting more cheaper oil, more abundant oil, and having it less expensive, we are truly drilling our own grave to do that and to give them the subsidies and the tax breaks that they continue to look for. I mean, I don't know if Americans realize or not that this is the most wealthy industry on the face of the planet right now, with record-breaking profits, still trying to ride on the backs of the American taxpayer by not paying their fair share. And so drilling to death, and then this hostility towards these minimum wage workers. And I remember President Bush saying something like, well, these are just students, these are not. But my research showed that the minimum wage earners, like, you know, huge majority of them were women, in fact.
The majority of minimum wage workers are adult women.
And many with children,
yes,
also.
Trying to support their families. It is a myth that it's teenagers just working for gas money. And God forbid the poor teenager that's trying to get to school and back these days, if he or she is working for gas money. But that's adult women. Many of them are holding 2 jobs, some even 3, just to make ends meet. But I want to talk about this idea of cutting taxes on the rich. Now, what they will tell you, and this has been going on since the Reagan administration, as you point out, is that it'll trickle down.
Right.
The rich have more money to spend, therefore they'll create jobs, and more people will have jobs, and therefore it'll pump up the economy. That's the mythology. But what we find is the rich people already have all the money they need. Most of the time they don't create jobs. They put it into investments, which are increasingly protected by the federal government. As you said, Enron. These Bear Stearns gets a bailout.
Right, right.
But what is really behind cutting taxes for the conservative ideologues really has nothing to do with trickle down or money at all. It has to do with starving the government so that the government goes away, so that it cannot provide the social services, so that we don't have to have Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, because they will eventually be able to say, we just don't have the money.
Right.
They call it starving the beast, meaning they just want to get rid of any government service that does not benefit capital.
So you really feel the push is towards a pure capitalistic model without the checks and balances.
Absolutely, and it's what we have in Russia right now, and we've seen how bad that is.
Right, because then we don't have the protections for the everyday people. We are on a collision course. I frequently refer to what's going on in America as the collision course between democracy and capitalism. And where do you find the balance? Because if you push too far one way, you end up with socialism, and we know that doesn't work. But if you push the other way, it would certainly be the demise of our nation. So
it would. And I want to say before we end, in terms of people voting, that women and men who care about women need to really grill their candidates on where they stand on reproductive rights, because the Supreme Court is hanging in the balance.
Martha, you know, a half hour goes by way too quickly. I hope you will come back again. The book is Your Money and Your Life by Martha Burke. Please pick it up, get informed, get involved, and thank you for joining us